Welcome, Meredith. How are you? And I'm going to share.
It's fine.
Can everybody see the slides at this point? Thumbs up. Great. All right. Thank you. Well, first of all, thanks for taking the time this afternoon to log in and find out a little bit more about the Seafood Dealer Processor Program, the SDPP. We've got just a few slides that we're going to cover today. Some of them are tips, a little bit of a tour. Meredith will cover a little bit of information on eligibility. Our goal with the slides is just to provide a brief overview. And after that, we're going to leave a majority of the time, 45 minutes or more if we really need it, for Q&A from you. Because obviously you dialed in, you probably have a specific question regarding the app. We'd like to get through as many of those questions as we can. All right. So if you have a question during the slide section here, feel free to unmute yourself and ask, and we'll take questions as we go through this. And then again, after a few slides, we'll open it up for Q&A. Meredith, you want to give us with a little bit of background?
Will do. Thanks. Hi, everyone. As Matt said, thanks for joining. So we have about $16 million available to support this program, and they're from 3 different funds. First is the American Rescue Plan Act, or ARPA. That is $10 million that the governor directed from her discretionary ARPA funds to support seafood dealers and processors. And that funding is really meant to be kind of broadly applicable, especially could cover reimbursements, but could also cover forward-looking expenditures, investments that people want to make in the future. The second pot is funding from NOAA. This is similar to the CARES Act funding that DMR put out about a year ago. And so here you again have to show a 35% revenue reduction in any given month in 2020 versus a 5-year historical average. So many of you who are DMR dealer license holders are familiar with that requirement. And the last bit of money, just under $1 million from USDA, which was money that that the Dealer Association and others advocated strongly for with the delegation, that they were able to get into pandemic relief to fund reimbursements for equipment and business pivots and other PPE. So we're trying to make it easy for people by putting all of these funds together in one application process. That does mean that there are a number of questions in the application process that kind of address various aspects of these requirements. So you don't have to meet the 35% revenue reduction to get funding in this program, but that's one pot of funding available. So we're trying to make sure we're maximizing everybody's access. And that's why we're asking a number of different questions about what you're trying to cover and whether you can meet different thresholds. Application is due by April 28th, and we hope to have awards out by the end of May. Next slide, if you would. Thanks, Matt. So the eligibility requirements are that your business is licensed by DMR as a wholesale seafood dealer or one of the buyers or processor licenses. We understand there may be some very rare exceptions to that. So if you're otherwise processing products harvested from marine waters in Maine for the wholesale trade, you're also eligible. We want your business to have been licensed prior to the pandemic. So we're starting with our dealer year, April 1st, 2020. And if you don't hold a license, you'd need to be operational as of that date. Your business will need to sell into the wholesale trade, have a permanent facility in Maine that's identified on your license. You'll need to articulate the impacts, the negative impacts of the pandemic on your business. You'll need to demonstrate a clear plan to utilize these funds at your facility in Maine to directly address the negative economic impacts of the pandemic on your business. You'll need to be able and willing to comply with certain biannual reporting requirements required by state and federal law, which we don't anticipate will be too onerous. Your business needs to be registered with the Secretary of State's corporate registry, and you'll also need a DUNS identification number, although it sounds like that requirement is changing to a different number, and I'll let Matt talk about that detail as we go further along.
Yeah, that was a slide I meant to fix last night. Sorry about that.
No worries.
And Meredith, one of the questions we got that took a lot of discussion at the last session was the difference that as you view harvesters versus processors. And if I do both, how do I draw the line, or where would you draw the line?
Yeah, so I think the difference is, are you, if you're a processor, you're doing something post-harvest to improve the product or sell it. So for shellfish businesses, if you're an aquaculturist who has a dealer license, this would be post-harvest. So not the work that you're doing on the water prior to the harvest, but this would be when your product gets tagged, for example. I might leave it there. And if there are other questions, we can certainly come back to those.
Okay. And the last thing I just wanted to mention to everyone, there are a large number of other buckets of funding that are coming down the pike, and FAME will have some additional funds available as well. So if you are a harvester, there might be opportunities as these funds, the next set of funds become available for you to apply again for some additional support. Let's talk a little bit about the application itself. We think of it as a two-part application. Part of it is a Word template, a Word document that you're going to download that we call the application template. That application template has 5 sections. We think it can be filled in approximately 30 to 45 minutes. We're not looking for long responses. In fact, one of the things that we would recommend is that you go into the MTI site for this program and take a look at the sample application. I think a lot of people who have done that realize the specificity that we're looking for in the answers and the length of the answers. And I think it would really help kind of frame your thinking about how you would like to respond on the application for your business. So after you fill out that Word document, that's a file that you'll save on your computer. You'll collect your financial documents, which are basically your P&L that you can, if you have the ability, you can print the side-by-side comparison of the P&L on a QuickBooks report, and then your balance sheet as of the end of 2021. We were asked at the last meeting, do the financials have to be audited? They do not. And the last piece of getting ready for the next part of the application is to download an agreement. That download is a simple 2-page, looks kind of like a contract, but it basically says that you sign here attesting that the information you're giving us is correct and true, that you'll use the money for the plan that is indicated on your application, and that if you use the money inappropriately, we have the right to come back and claw it back. So it's only 2 pages. It's not that complex, but it needs to be downloaded and signed as part of the uploads. So when we look at the Word document is going to give us the information we need to score your application and basically figure out what buckets of money would make sense for your business. So we're not asking you to be a NOAA expert or a Department of Agriculture expert or an ARPA expert. If you can just answer the questions, the MTI processor will figure out where you need to be. And, at the end, so the Word document gives us the story about your business, but we also need some data that we can pull in the future. For instance, what county are you in? How many employees do you have, etc. So once that data is in our database, we're able to pull the reports against all those fields. So that's the second part of the application. The Word document is the first part, and then you'll answer about 15 questions in our database. At that point, you're ready to upload your application, your financials, and also the signed agreement. The one change I did make in this slide, I forgot to make it on the other. In the past, in order to get federal money, you needed to be able to show them and report to the federal government with your DUNS number. And the DUNS number was obtained from Dun & Bradstreet. As of April 4th, just last week, the federal government decided that they will no longer accept a DUNS number. What they want is instead what they call a unique entity ID, or a UEI. And that UEI number comes from the government website called sam.gov, which is their purchasing arm. So there's a lot of information that'll be on the site, that is on the site now, about how to find sam.gov. There's videos on how to get a UEI. There's 2 different types of UEIs you can get, and we explain on the site which one you want to sign up for. But we'll need to get an UEI number from you, and you'll upload that into our database prior to receiving any awards. Once the file has been uploaded correctly, we will be sending you an email confirming that that application is now in our database and we're ready to start the scoring. Save that email. In the event that there's a problem or any kind of doubt regarding the submission of your application, that email is proof that you actually did the upload. Okay. Any questions? I'll stop there. You can unmute yourself or ask any questions on the application tips.
Yeah, thank you. Mike Gaffney here. I've got a question on the UEI.
Okay.
I went to that website and went through all the steps, and I get a message that says because of the volume of requests, they're backlogged, and they can't give me a date as to when they're going to provide it. I keep checking back, and I don't see any change in that message. I'm wondering if that's been your experience, and is this something I need to be concerned about?
Yeah, it is, Mike. And here's the best answer I can give you right now. On Friday of last week, we had some discussions with the organization that's responsible for this program and the change in the program. And they gave us permission to use the TEI, taxpayer identification, the TIN number, if the UEI number was not going to be available. Now, they have promised that this site will be up and running and fully functional this week. And so I'm optimistic that you will be able to log back in and get your UEI number. In the event that doesn't happen, we're not going to stop the program, but we're going to have to go back and work it through a taxpayer identification number instead. But UEI is preferred because all of our future reporting back to the federal government, they require, at least what they've written so far, is that they're requiring that we report back for each grant with the UEI number. So if they make an exception by allowing taxpayer IDs right now, I'm expecting that at some point in the future, they're going to tell us that we still need to get the UEI number.
All right. I'll keep
checking back.
on it.
Yeah.
And Matt, one of another thing for applicants to be aware of, my understanding, and again, it has been a bizarre. We were notified a few days after we went live with this application. My understanding is that if you already had a DUNS number, then you have a UEI number has been created. Is that accurate, Matt?
No, that's not accurate.
Okay.
The UEI number was needed for past awards and grants that came directly from the federal government. Okay, and so if you had an entity agreement with the SAM in the past, you still have a UEI number today. Okay, but if you had a DUNS number in the past, there was no correlation and no transfer over to a new UEI. Now, one of the things that's going to be a little bit complex when you go to get your UEI, it asks if you are looking for the UEI to get a grant from the federal government. And if you say yes to that, you're taken to a part of the site that is very complex and long to fill out. Know that this money that you're getting originated from the federal government, but it was given to the state. And so it is not considered a federal grant. So on that part of the question, you do not want to answer yes. You just say you want to, there's an abbreviated form just to get what they call a UEI. And so that's the one you want.
I've got one additional question. In the last Zoom meeting, you mentioned that for folks who don't have accounting software, they could substitute for the profit and loss statement the last 3 years of our tax forms. And in my case, that's LLC S Corp and 1120-S. So my question is twofold. One is the 1120-S by itself all you need, or do you need all the attachments behind that?
I need Schedule 1, which is basically will show revenue and expenses for your business. But that's really all I need.
All right.
I'm
And
not
then,
looking for personal information.
okay, the other question related is, will those tax forms suffice for a balance sheet as well? Again, if I don't have accounting software, will the tax form suffice, or do I need to construct a balance sheet?
A simple balance sheet in Excel would be great. And basically, all I need to know is current cash positions and any accounts payable and receivables that are outstanding. So
Okay.
yeah, no more than a few lines is fine.
Okay. And does that, you mentioned Excel, I mean, that seems like just a simple list. Can I put that together in a
Sure.
Word document?
Yeah, it does. Word document's fine. Yep.
Okay. All right. So just to recap, in the absence of accounting software, I can satisfy the requirements of the balance sheet by providing that information, putting together a list myself, and my 1120S's for 3 years will suffice for profit and loss.
As long as you have the Schedule 1. Yep.
Schedule 1, right?
Okay.
Thank you much.
You're welcome. I'm going to hand it off to Lou. You're muted, Lou.
Sorry about that. Trying to share the screen. So just a visual representation of some of what Matt was talking about there. So the main application page here on our website from maintechnology.org. These little icons guide you to the sections of the application. How do I apply? The first step is to download the application Word document. That downloads and you pull this document up, and you can enable editing and save as to your computer, to your desktop, and you'll save your version of this. So you'll literally go through the 5 sections of this Word document, type in responses to all the questions. There's a disclosures and confidentiality statement. This is a copy of the document that's in the online application portal as well. This last page. Sorry, I'm making people busy. But so the first step, as Matt said, is to complete all the information in these questions in the Word document. You save that document, compile the other required materials that are in the checklist here. And that, of course, the DUNS number is now a UEI number. And again, we certainly apologize for the confusion there. If we could have avoided it, we certainly would have preferred to. And so once you've got all these items in the checklist, you can then proceed to the second step, which is the online application portal. So there's really no need to go to the online application portal until you've completed your application Word document responses and compiled electronic versions of all the files in the checklist here. So once you are ready, you can click the link to this online application portal, which will ask you for an email address and a password. If this is your first time applying for MTI funds, then you're going to need to click on the new applicant option here at the bottom to create your login credentials. Be sure to use an email address that you are currently actively using, because we're going to use this email address to contact you, both to confirm the successful submission of your application, as well as to give you any updates regarding the funding decisions. So once you've got your email and password, you can log into the system. And sometimes it's a little slow, but it'll eventually log into the main page here. So this is the online application portal main screen. There's 4 tabs. The first one is application up here in blue. As Matt mentioned earlier, there's a small set of instructions on how to work this portal. And then there's a number of fields, information fields that you have to complete. Contact information, a little bit of specific information regarding your funding request and how you're proposing to use the funds and how the pandemic has negatively impacted your business. These are items we need to collect for our reporting purposes back to the federal government. Once you've completed all those information fields, you can then move on to the upload documents section. And this is where you upload all the required documents that were identified in the application checklist from the Word document. So you click choose a file, your screen comes up. You click on the you click on your file name that you want, and then you click the upload button, and then it is uploaded. You do that for each of the required fields. And as we've briefly discussed here, you have the option of either doing balance sheet and income statements, or as an alternative to income statements, you can do the federal tax documents that we discussed in the prior question. And then the agreement, your signed and dated copy of the agreement to utilize these funds as to address negative impacts of the pandemic as you've proposed in your application. And that agreement, the blank copy of it can be accessed from the website as well. So you upload all the required documents, you put all the required information in the information fields. There's a brief electronic disclosure that we ask you to read and type your name in to electronically sign. And then you can review and submit your request for final review. Application portal will tell you if you haven't completed all the required information. Once you have completed all the required information, the option to submit will appear up here at the top of the screen. And at that point, once you've clicked the submit button, you will get a confirmation on the screen, and in an email form, you'll get an email confirmation that your application has been submitted. You can also save a partially completed online application and come back to it later. You'll get an email notifying you that you've saved it as well, but just we've tried to make it clear in that email that this does not mean that you've completed the application submission. If you've just saved a partial application, you have to go back in and complete all the required fields and click the submit button before the application deadline date on the 28th of the month. So as Matt said, you'll get an email confirmation once you've completed the online application submission. And then at that point, we'll notify you in the case that some additional information is required, and then we'll try to make award announcements by the end of May. And that's about all there. I think it looks like there's one chat. What are the chances of extending the deadline? I mean, I think preferably we won't have to do that. If we extend the deadline, then it's going to make it extend the time we need to make all the reviews and funding decisions. So preferably we can stick with the deadline we've got here. But I think the application portal, we've tried to make the application relatively simple. As Matt said, we're not looking for particularly long application responses, concise responses that give specific detail as to dollar estimates of how much the impact of the pandemic has hurt your business, and then some specifics around how you're planning to use the funds you're requesting to address the negative impacts of the pandemic. That's really all you need to put in this Word document. So it doesn't have to be so we're thinking within an hour you should be able to complete the online application Word document at the most, hopefully.
We did find that as people looked at the sample application, they began to get a sense as to how long and how much detail we needed. So I think if you're writing too much or you're questioning whether you can get this done by the end of the month, if you take a look at that sample, you'll realize that we're accepting good estimates. For instance, if you say you're going to hire somebody with this money and that's going to be a $50,000 investment. Well, if you hire the person at $51,000 or $49,000, that's not a big deal. Nobody cares about that. So using your best estimate on some of the costs allow you to put a plan together relatively quickly. So we're hoping it's not too onerous for you.
And to Matt's point there is a FAQs on the web page, and one of those questions asks how much detail is necessary to include in the application. And from there is a link to the sample application that Matt mentioned, and you can download that. It's a Word document that looks very much like the application template. All right, so I'll stop my sharing my screen now. Any other questions?
Yeah, anybody else who wants to unmute themselves and ask, feel free to jump in.
Nick Alfiero here. Hi.
Hi, Nick.
Hear me okay?
Yeah, fine.
Yeah, I didn't catch your first Zoom. My brother did, and I'm sort of on the tail end of this a little bit. But for example, part of this, it seems like we can get reimbursed for all the PPE we spent. Like we paid for testing for 50 people, maybe 4 or 5 times, all that sort of thing.
Right.
Do you need all that documented? Or, I mean, I don't even know if we can go back, and certainly in 20 days, I don't know if we can go back and pull all that info. That's a ton of info.
It is. So, and that's a really good question, Nick. The reason this appears a little bit confusing is that some of the buckets of money are looking backwards
Mhm.
at what you've spent. And then some of the buckets of money are looking forward as to what your plan is to mitigate the damages for your business. And I know that we're trying to mix, forward and backwards looking perspectives. But as it relates to expenses that you've had for PPP equipment and things like that, what we have seen on other applications that appears reasonable is good estimates. For instance, like your testing, a test cost $15 and I had X number of employees do it X number of times. If that's the level of detail, that's great. The only caution that I'm going to lay back with you is that in the event of an audit, the government has the right to come back and ask for your receipts.
Mhm.
They're also going to have to give you a reasonable amount of time to get them. But as long as your estimates are reasonable, I think that you're going to be fine. And that's
Okay.
one of the things that we'll be looking at, Nick, as the reviewer. So if you tell me you have 3 employees and you spend, $15,000 on testing, I'm going to raise my hand and say, I'm not sure that's true. I may ask for a receipt on that. But if the testing costs and the number of employees seem to make sense, we're going to move on. And
For example, we had, every time we had an employee come down with COVID, we quarantined them, tell them to stay home for 14 days, and we continued to pay them. So I'm assuming that that's sort of in the past money recovery bucket, I'm assuming. And again, going back and retracing all those steps in 20 days is a tough one.
it is.
But
We've had that.
we can guesstimate some of that to get pretty close.
Yeah, and people have guesstimated the number of sick days that they had to pay during this COVID, and even if they weren't sick, some people were at home because they had children at home or they had a parent
yeah.
who was sick. I mean, it was a difficult time for everybody. But if there's a reasonable estimate on the number of days, that's really all you want to put down.
Second part of my question is the moving forward part, the investment portion that we would like to do is one thing we found during the pandemic was that when the lobster business really went to heck and prices collapsed, and we have, for example, we have an overboard discharge system, so a warm water system. And one of the things that we would like to do is build a closed system, refrigerated, et cetera. So is that something we can put in that we would like to move forward to invest in?
Yeah,
What we found is that we couldn't hold lobsters at all during that period when things went to, they really went bad. Demand really fell off.
yeah. So the investment that you're talking about, Nick, is a perfect example of what they're trying to allow for and pay for. So that investment would make your business less susceptible to the next pandemic, God forbid, right? It would make your business more resilient. And it's a worthwhile investment. That's a great application for the ARPA funding.
So we just, for me to get total estimates done in 20 days from the people that would build that system, I think it's going to be very difficult. And I'm going to propose that we just built a system in a new store we built in Scarborough that is a closed system, refrigerated, But the one we're gonna have to build on our other location is probably like 3 times the size. So if we put in some sort of, here's what we think it'll cost based on what we just went through in the last 6 months, is that an acceptable proposal?
Yeah, that's the best you're going to be able to do between now and the end of the month.
Okay,
That's a reasonable approach. I will tell you that we expect that the demand for the money will be in excess of our supply, right?
Mhm.
So even though you may have requested X number of dollars, there's a good chance that you may end up with something less than that, right?
Well, half a loaf is okay.
Well, the other challenge that we have is if the half a loaf isn't enough even to start the project, that would be unfortunate, right? We would like to see you take this money as far as you possibly can to make your business more resilient.
Okay,
So we had a situation on another fund that we're managing where we had to give a haircut to everybody's request. The amount of the haircut meant that he had to completely ditch that project.
Yep.
But he did come back with another project. And you'll note in the agreement that you sign that if you need to change your project, all you need to do is drop us a note. And
okay,
we'll take that note, we'll add it to your file, we'll approve it, send you back confirmation that your new project is X versus Y.
all right.
So in the event of an audit, everybody's covered.
Now, during this-
Ultimately, as long as it's addressing negative impacts of the pandemic, that's the most important
No,
thing we have to
no,
be
I-
able to instrumentate.
I get that one, yeah. Now,
I guess one other thing I would just say on that, Nick, I mean, I think to the extent that you can articulate, I can move ahead with this project if I only get a portion of the funds, like, down to half of the requested amount or something.
well, maybe
you know.
3/4, maybe 3/4 of a loaf is better.
But to the extent that you can articulate that in your application, that will help,
Okay.
we're not saying that you'll only get that, but it helps us to kind of think about, is it possible for this project to go ahead as is?
Okay, I understand. Last question for me. Along the way here, if my bookkeeper is going to kind of pull all this together as far as the information on the looking back part. Is there anyone that she can contact and if she's got problems trying to upload, because we don't use Excel, is there anyone we can contact
Yes.
to help with that process?
Yeah, if you run into technical problems, there's a email address on the site at MTI.
Okay, MTI.
Yeah, just drop us a note and we'll be back in touch to try and help you.
Okay, great. Thank you.
I think I was just on the phone with Laurie today as well.
Oh, you were?
Yeah.
I'm south. I'm south. I'm in Florida, so I am. They're all taking care of this at home, so I'm a little out of the loop.
Laurie, any other questions from you? Did I answer your questions earlier?
I'm having such trouble hearing that I really couldn't understand the last bit while Mr. Alfiero was speaking. I think you answered most of my questions. I was mostly just listening in today.
Okay, and we're going to post this this webinar up on the site, so you'll have a chance to listen to it again.
Thank you.
And Lori, if you need to connect separately, you can call me. You know how to reach us.
Okay. Next time, for the next one, I'll have a different device with me.
Anybody else have questions regarding the process? Again, if you haven't started the application and some of this sounds like Chinese, get started and then feel free to come back for another seminar next week. The schedule's up on the website, or reach out via email if you need to have something answered directly. Happy to help. All right, with that, I'll close it up. Thank you very much for attending this afternoon. And again, let us know if we can do anything to help you get this application in before the month end. Have a nice evening.
Thank you all.